Alright, in this tutorial, I'm going to be teaching you how to achieve this product ad. Now in Photoshop, I'm going to use the 1080 by 1080 dimension. I don't need to use artboard, so I'm not going to click that. So just click on create. Now in Photoshop, as I always do, I will unlock my background by clicking on the padlock icon. I have my bag image already here, the product image which I generated in ChatGPT. So I'm going to be bringing it into the project. I've already removed the background, so I just drag it and drop it into the project. And what I want to do is to convert it into a smart object so that I get rid of all the layer mask I have there already. So what I'm going to do next is to reduce the size a little bit. So I press Command T and holding down my Alt button, or if you have the be option, you click and drag from the corner to reduce the product image like that. And when you're satisfied with how it looks, you can click on the enter button to accept the change. Now, the next thing I want to do is to sample the the color from the product so that I can use that for my background. So having done that, I can hide my background layer and click on the option right there. Scroll down and select solid color, right? And I would just select the color I want to use. I want it to be light, right? And once you're satisfied with the color, you click on the OK button to accept the color that you have selected. Now, the next thing I want to do essentially is to add some kind of shadows to the edges of the canvas, right? So that to give it a kind of perspective to draw your eyes to the center of the image where the product is going to be, since the product is the focal point of the image. So in order to do that, you click on the create new layer button, then you set the blending mode to overlay. Then the next thing I'm going to do is to change the color to black, right, for the shadow effect. And I'm going to select my brush too. So make sure that my flow is on 11. If you are using, and that's because I'm using a mouse. So if you are using a what's it called now, a graphic tab, you'll be able to use simulate pressure, right? But for since I'm working with a brush, I'm going to set the flow to 11. Then I'm just going to paint around the edges, right? I'm going to paint around the edges to have that shadow effect. So it's a very beginner level approach, and you can just start brushing the edges like I will start doing right now. So brushing through the edges, now you can begin to see some of the shadow effects coming to the page. You can begin to see the shadow effects just lightly, just into brush. So since I'm using my flow is on 11, I have to, if you want it to be thick, you have to brush it multiple times. And the next thing I want to do now is to add highlight to the middle, just to, of course, like I mentioned, control the height to go to the center of the canvas, since that is where the product is going to be, right? So in order to do that, I'm just labeling the name so that you can easily recognize it. So we have the shadows and we call the one highlight. Now, like before, we are going to set the blending mode to overlay and change the color to white. Now, for this particular one, I'm going to set my, after selecting my brush, I'm going to set my flow to 100 since this is a highlight, so I can always use the opacity option to reduce the intensity of that. And since this is highlight, so I'm just going to change the color to white and just dab one single time. Just click once and you can see the highlight effect already, right? So what I want to do now is to just reduce the opacity so that the highlight is not too strong, not too strong. So I'm going to reduce the opacity a little bit like that and have the highlights in the middle. Now, the next thing I want to do now is to work on the image, right? Because I can see that the yellow on the image is too strong. So I just want to do a little bit of touch up on the image here and there to just make it cooler and also increase things like the contrast and things like that. So in order to do that, I'm going to use my camera raw filter like I always do. So click on filter, click on camera raw filter, right? And open up your camera raw filter. give it some time to open. So once it opens up, then you begin by, I always like to work on the contrast, right? To just, create contrast of the image. The next thing is to work on the white balance, reduce the yellow, right? So that it looks cooler. Another thing I always like to do is also to tweak the texture and yeah, tweak the texture so that it can look sharper. Right. So once you're happy with it, click on OK, and you have the settings already affected on the image. So the next thing I would want to do now is to draw the rectangle, right? The green rectangle where we are going to put the text that we want to put. So I'm going to draw that right here. And I want the bag to go over the image. So let me just reduce it. Let me increase a bit so that it covers that part properly. So having done that, next I'm going to do is to select my shape tool and draw out my rectangle like that. So you click and drag and draw a rectangle. Now, I want the edges of the rectangle to be rounded. So I'm going to use that particular anchor point I have there by clicking it and dragging it inwards. Help me to curve out the edges of the of the rectangle. Alternatively, you can change the value of the corner radius by changing those values in the property panel, right? But yeah, for this I prefer to use the anchor options. Now, the next thing I want to do is to change the color by clicking the layer thumbnail right there. That little shape we have on the layer thumbnail. Right, double click it, opens up the color picker. And I'm just going to sample the color from the bag and click on OK. Now, the next thing I want to do now is to place the bag over the rectangle to make it look as if it covers or it flows over the rectangle. In order to do that, I'm going to use the layer mask. So, but before I do that, I'll just move it down a little bit so that it aligns properly. So I'm currently using the arrow button on my keyboard to just move it a little bit. So the next thing I'm going to do is to move the bag over the bag layer above the rectangle layer, right? Having done that, what I want to do now is to make it go over, and what I'm going to use to achieve this is layer mask, right? Mask, like I explained, allows us to be able to achieve some of these things, right? So in order to do that, the first thing I want to do is to make the rectangle. I want to make it a selection, right? I'll make it a selection, then create the mask. So in order to achieve that, I'm going to click on the layer thumbnail, hold down my control, click on the layer thumbnail, and it makes the rectangle a selection. So having done that, I'm just going to click on the mask button, making sure that the back layer is selected. I will click on the mask button, and I'll press Command I on that to inverse the mask, right? So now the next thing I want to do now is to draw, to make sure that that part, all right, that's the part that will be hidden, and this other part would be over the rectangle. In order to achieve that, all I have to do is to select that part, right? Make a selection of that part, and like I mentioned before, look that with your layer mask, black is what helps you to hide things, and white is what allows us to reveal things. So what I'm going to do right there is to fill that part of the layer mask with white so that that part of the bag will be revealed. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is to right click. I'm going to right click, then I'm going to get fill. Then the option I'm going to select is white, since white helps us to reveal things. So click on OK, and you can see that part is already revealed. So the next thing I want to do now is to put a drop shadow, right? So that it will look as if the bag is casting a shadow on the rectangle. So in order to do that, there are different methods of doing that, but the method I want to use for this right now is the layer style method. So what I'm going to do is to double click on any part of the layer. Just double click. Make sure that you're not double clicking on the name, right? Because double clicking on the name will allow you to edit the name. So you double click on and go into the layer style. I'll select drop shadow. Right. I'll select drop shadow. Select drop shadow. Right. Having selected drop shadow, I'm going to work I can use my mouse to just click and drag, right? But for this, I want the angle to be zero, right? So I'm just going to tweak the distance, then also tweak the size a little bit. Then, of course, I'm going to work on the opacity because I don't want the shadow to be too strong. So I'm going to just work on the on the opacity and reduce the opacity a little bit. Use the opacity to be something that is suitable for what I want to achieve. So having done that, I'm going to click on OK. So yes, now the next thing I want to do is that because that shadow is not meant to be everywhere on the bag, so I want it to be restricted into the rectangle alone because I want it to make it look as if the shadow is casting on the rectangle. So in order for me to do that, I'm going to separate the drop shadow from the layer. So I'll go to layers, go to layer style, and click on layer style, and you click on create layer, right? Once you click on that, it separates the so what that does essentially is separates the shadow layer from the actual layer itself, right? You can see that the shadow layer is now on a separate layer. So what I'm going to do now is to clip the shadow into the rectangle so that the shadow is confined only into the rectangle. So I'm going to clip it by holding down my alt and clicking between the layers, right? And it clips it into that shape like that. So the next thing I want to do now is to add the text, right? So I have the text, so I'm just going to copy and paste them right here. Special sales, right? What I'm going to do now is to change to move to, I'm going to increase the size and also align it to the center of the shape that I have there already. So like before, you just make a selection of the shape, control and click the layer thumbnail. And with my move to, I'm going to click on align horizontal and align vertical. And my text aligns perfectly into the shape. Now, the next thing I want to do now is to put the text, I think 74% off. I'm going to put it right there. So I'm just going to paste it also like before. Yeah, Control V to paste. You can press T to select your text to then Control V to paste. Then the color is white, so I'm changing the color to green so that we can make it visible on the layer. And I see that the leading is that's the line between the distance between the lines, the spacing between the lines is too big. So I'm going to change the leading by dragging to the back till I'm satisfied. I think I'm okay with what I have right now. I'm going to now press Command T. That's if you're on Mac. On Windows, that will be Control T to increase the size of the text. Press Enter key to accept when you're happy with that. Then just drag it down a little bit to just hide it behind the bag. So having done that, I think I'm okay with that. What I want to do now is to also duplicate it and make it bigger so that it will be subtle on the background. So I'm going to press Command T or Control T. Then I'm going to scale it up. Scale it up. So having scaled it up, yes, I'm going to scale it up. And before I will just convert it, I'm going to move it down a bit also so that it's just above the layers, the background layers, right? So I want to convert it to a smart object. I'm going to right click. I'm going to right click, select smart object, convert to smart object. And the reason why I'm doing that is so that by the time I'm adding other text, I won't maybe by mistake trigger that. The next I'm going to do is to reduce the opacity to about 5%. So that it's just so subtle on the background. It's not very vivid or strong on the background. So having done that, next thing I want to do is to add the other text I want to add. So, but before I do that, I want to add my before I do that, I want to add a shadow. Want to add a shadow under the image so that it look as if it's just floating. So I'm going to go to my brush tool. I want you to pay attention to what I'm going to do now. I'm going to my brush tool. And on my brush tool, I'm going to reduce the size of my brush tool by using the left corner bracket key. The left corner bracket key helps to reduce the size of your brush radius, and the right corner bracket key helps to increase the size. So I'm just going to reduce it. Then go to my brush properties. If you can't see your brush properties, you can just click on this button right here, this option right here, and it brings up your brush property. So what I want to first do is to reduce the roundness to about 10%. Yes, that's the roundness of my brush. So it flattens it, right? And the next thing I want to do is to change the angle of the brush to about minus 10 or minus 15, right? And make sure that the color I'm using is black because, of course, the shadow is going to be black. So I'm going to put I'm going to put the shadow right that just dab once and change back to my move tool. I'm going to reduce the opacity so that it looks more like a shadow. If you are not happy with how it looks, you can just scale it up. You can also rotate it a little bit like that. Then would reduce the opacity to something subtle uh, for the shadow to just to look as if the bag is floating. So I'm casting the shadow on the ground. Right. So yes, there we have it. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to add lines because I'm going to add some text. Right, I'm going to add some text. So next thing I want to do now is to add my guides. So in order to do that, go to View and select the guides. So I'm going to paste the text I want to use there. So I think this text is too big now. I'm going to reduce the size of the text to about to just make it small. It doesn't have to be too big. So I'm going to position it right there. Move it with my move tool. And I'm going to change I don't want that one to be bold, so I'm going to just select it right there and change it to medium right there. So I'm going to duplicate this text and also add the other text I want to add, which is the website text. So I'm going to duplicate by holding down my Alt key and click and drag. I'm holding down my Shift also to allow it to move on a straight line. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to just paste the text that I have already right there. After pasting the text, I'm just going to nudge it to the left a bit so that it aligns. And I'm going to change the website to bold because I want the website to be bold. So I'm going to select bold for the website. Right. So having done that, I can accept the change by just clicking on that. So next thing I want to do is to put the CTA. So I want the CTA to look like a button. The CTA will be order now. So I'm going to copy the text and paste it right there. Then next thing I'm going to do is to draw a rectangle behind it. And I'm also going to round the corner of the rectangle so that it looks like a button, right? And, Now I'm going to draw the rectangle behind it. I'm going to change the color of the rectangle to look like this one right here. And having done that, I'm going to adjust the corner radius, so that it looks more like a button. Then the text is not meant to be black, so I'm going to change the color of the text to white by using the color option under my character panel and change the color to white. I'm going to put both the text and the rectangle into a group. Select the two together and press Command G. So before I do that, I want to align. So I will click. I would make the shape the selection. Then using my move to align horizontally and align vertically. Now having done that, press Command D to deselect. Select the two text and make it into a group. Then I'm just going to reduce the size a bit so that it fits with the other text I have there already, right? So just next I'm just going to do is also to move it down to also align, right? And the next thing I'm going to do now is to press Command A to make the whole canvas selection, then align horizontally like that, and everything looks perfect. The next thing, like I always do, is to the texture. Add the texture by pressing Control Shift N to bring up this layer. Make sure that the blending mode is set to overlay. Make sure that you click on fill with 50% gray and click on OK. Having done that, next thing is to go to filter, go to noise, click on add noise. Make sure that uniform is selected and that you're on monochromatic. You can set the amount to something that fits what you want. You can click on preview to make sure that you are seeing what you are doing. Then you click on OK and you can see the texture. Yeah, but I think the noise texture is too much, so I'm going to reduce it to about 50%. And yeah, I think 50% is also too much, so I'm going to reduce it to say 40%. And that brings us to the end of this tutorial. Please do not forget to like, share with a beginner who is interested in learning Photoshop for the purpose of design. And until I see you again, stay cool, guys. Bye.